Captain Lee Minho stared out the window of his ship as stars stretched past them in long white lines. After 30 years of exploring space alone, Earth had finally received a message from someone else. The message was simple. You are invited to join us. Now their small human ship moved toward a massive alien vessel that looked like a floating crystal palace. Minho had seen many strange things in space, but nothing like this. The alien ship was perfectly smooth, with no rough edges or random parts. Every surface curved in exact mathematical patterns that hurt to look at for too long. "Captain, they're asking us to come aboard," said Kim So-min from her seat at the communications panel. Her voice sounded nervous. They were about to meet aliens, for the first time in human history. "Tell them we accept," Minho replied. He straightened his uniform and tried to look like someone who represented all of humanity. It felt like a big responsibility. The alien ship's docking bay was unlike anything they had ever seen. Everything was white and clean, with soft blue lights that seemed to come from the walls themselves. No shadows existed anywhere. Even their footsteps made no sound on the strange floor. A figure appeared in front of them without warning. It looked like a person made of clear crystal, tall and thin, with light flowing through its body like water. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Keeper Velthar of the Galactic Concordat. You have traveled far to reach this moment." Park Ji-hoon, their science officer, stepped forward with his scanner ready. "We're honored to meet you. How many species belong to your Concordat?" 47,312, Velthar answered without hesitation. "Each has found their proper place according to the Axiom Protocol. Each contributes to the greater harmony of our civilization." Dr. Choi Heron raised her hand like a student in class. "What exactly is this protocol you mentioned?" Velthar gestured, and the air around them filled with floating numbers and equations. Mathematical formulas danced in the space between them, showing patterns and calculations that seemed to go on forever. "The protocol is the foundation of all galactic life," Velthar explained. "For 12,000 years, it has calculated the most efficient way for every species to live, work, and contribute. Trade routes are determined by mathematical optimization. Conflicts are resolved through probability calculations. Even art and music follow specific formulas for maximum harmony." Yoon Dae-ho, their engineer, looked confused. "But what if someone wants to do something different? What if they have a new idea?" "New ideas create chaos," Velthar said simply. "Chaos leads to inefficiency. Inefficiency causes suffering. The protocol eliminates suffering by eliminating uncertainty." The crystal being waved its hand, and a holographic display appeared showing Earth and its solar system. Beside it, text appeared in multiple languages, including Korean and English. "Your species has been evaluated through your radio transmissions, your conflicts, and your unpredictable behaviors. The eternal symmetry has made their decision." The display changed to show a classification report. At the top in bold letters it read, "Species humans. Classification, probability disruptors. Threat level, moderate. Assignment, remote monitoring station Omega-7. "Probability disruptors?" Minho asked. "What does that mean?" "Your species makes choices that cannot be calculated in advance," Velthar explained. "You create art without following formulas. You solve problems in ways that make no mathematical sense. You change your minds for reasons that serve no logical purpose. This behavior could spread to other species if left unchecked." Kim So-min felt her heart sink. "So you're going to lock us away?" "You will be given a comfortable station at the edge of Concordat space. There you will observe proper galactic civilization and learn to adapt your chaotic tendencies. Other species will be protected from your unpredictable influence." The display showed their new home, a small space station floating alone between star systems far from any populated worlds. It looked like a prison made of metal and loneliness. "But what if we don't want to go there?" Yoon Dae-ho asked. "The protocol has calculated this conversation," Velthar said calmly. "You will resist at first, as all chaotic species do, but you will discover that following the proper path brings peace. Uncertainty creates stress. Order creates happiness. Minho looked at his crew. He saw the disappointment in their eyes, the frustration of traveling so far, only to be told they were too dangerous to join galactic society. But he also saw something else: determination. "We'll go to your monitoring station," he said finally. "But we'd like to learn more about how your society works. Maybe we can find a way to contribute without causing problems." Velthar's crystal body flickered with what might have been approval. This response was within acceptable probability ranges. "You will be escorted to Station Omega-7 tomorrow. Until then, you may rest aboard our vessel." As they were led to guest quarters, Minho whispered to his team, "Keep your eyes open. There's more to this perfect society than they're telling us." None of them knew it yet, but they were about to discover that even the most perfect systems had cracks where chaos could take root and grow. 3 months had passed since the humans arrived at Station Omega-7. The small outpost floated in empty space, surrounded by nothing but distant stars and the occasional supply ship. Captain Lee Minho watched his crew adapt to their new life of observation and reports, but he could see the frustration growing in their eyes. Their daily routine was simple and boring. They monitored galactic communications, filed reports about trade routes, and studied the proper way different species were supposed to behave. Everything was calculated, organized, and predictable. It was driving them crazy. Another supply. "Ship is coming," Kim Soman announced from her station. "It's the same Cathari crew as last month." Yoon Daeho looked up from his engineering console with interest. Over the past few visits, he had become friends with one of the alien workers. Maybe Thraknal will have time to talk again. When the supply ship docked, Thraknal stepped aboard their station. He was tall and powerful, with gray skin covered in scars that told stories of old battles. But his eyes looked tired and sad, like someone who had given up on life. "Hello, human friends," Thraknal said in his deep voice. "I bring your food supplies and equipment repairs." "How are you doing, Thrak?" Daeho asked, using the shorter name his friend preferred. Thraknal looked around to make sure they were alone, then sat down heavily. "I am existing. The protocol says this is sufficient." "You don't sound happy about it," Dr. Choi Heron observed. "My people were once great warriors," Thraknal whispered. "We conquered star systems and fought legendary battles. Our songs told of brave deeds and glorious victories. But the protocol calculated that our fighting methods were inefficient compared to modern weapons. So now we repair air filters and deliver supplies." Park Ji-hoon leaned forward. "What happened to your warrior traditions?" "Forbidden," Thraknal said simply. "The Eternal Symmetry decided that our combat skills served no useful purpose in modern galactic society. We were reassigned to maintenance work. The protocol determined this would make us more productive citizens." "But what about what you wanted?" Minho asked. Thraknal looked confused by the question. "Want? The protocol calculates what is needed. Individual desires create inefficiency." During their conversation, Heron noticed something interesting. When Thraknal talked about his people's past, his voice became stronger and his eyes brighter. When he discussed his current work, he seemed to shrink into himself. After the supply ship left, the humans gathered in their small meeting room. "Did you notice how different he looked when talking about the old days?" Heron asked. "The protocol isn't just organizing society," Soman realized. "It's crushing entire cultures." Over the following weeks, they met other species who came to their station. Each one had a similar story. The Veltani had been master artists, but now they only painted approved patterns for government buildings. The Andromedans had been brilliant scientists, but their research was limited to topics the protocol deemed practically useful. Dr. Vexta was the most heartbreaking case. She was an elderly Andromedan scientist who had once studied the mysteries of space and time. Now she worked in a data processing center, filing reports about mineral shipments. "I used to explore the deepest questions of existence," she told them during a brief visit. "Why do stars form? How does consciousness arise? What lies beyond our dimension?" But the protocol calculated that such research was unnecessarily innovative and served no immediate practical purpose. "What happened to your work?" Ji-hoon asked. "Terminated," My laboratory was converted to a storage facility. My research notes were archived and sealed. I was given a new assignment that would better serve galactic efficiency. Don't you miss it? Heron asked. Vexta's large eyes filled with something that looked like tears. Every day. But missing something that cannot be changed is illogical. The protocol teaches us to accept what is optimal. The breaking point came during a routine supply mission. A cargo transport carrying medical supplies to a colony world suffered a massive system failure. The ship was stuck in space with no engines, and the colony desperately needed the medicine. The protocol's response was methodical and slow. First, a rescue ship would be dispatched from the nearest approved facility. Then the cargo would be transferred using standard procedures. Finally, the supplies would be delivered to the colony following proper safety protocols. Total time: 6 days. 6 days? Minho stared at the communication screen in disbelief. People are dying down there. The protocol ensures safety through proper procedures, the Concordate coordinator explained calmly. Rushing leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to inefficiency. But we're right here, Daiho pointed out. We could reach them in 4 hours. Your station is not equipped for rescue operations. You lack proper certification for cargo transfer. The protocol does not permit improvisation. Minho looked at his crew. He saw the same anger and frustration in their faces that he felt in his heart. Forget the protocol, he decided. We're saving those people. The humans worked through the night using mining equipment, spare parts, and pure determination. They rigged up a makeshift rescue system that would have horrified any Concordate engineer. It was ugly, dangerous, and completely against regulations. It also worked perfectly. They rescued the cargo ship and delivered the medicine in 8 hours instead of 6 days. Hundreds of lives were saved because humans refused to follow the rules. But their actions horrified every alien who witnessed them. The Concordate observers filed emergency reports about dangerous, chaotic behavior and complete protocol violation. The humans had just proven that sometimes breaking the rules was the right thing to do. The message arrived 3 weeks after the rescue mission. Captain Lee Minho read it twice before calling his crew together. The Eternal Symmetry wanted to see him immediately at the Concordate capital. This doesn't sound good, Kim Soman said as she prepared the ship for departure. Maybe they want to thank us for saving those people, Yoon Daeho suggested hopefully. Park Ji-hoon shook his head. I don't think the Eternal Symmetry does thanks. The journey to the capital took 2 days. When they arrived, Minho found himself standing alone in the most incredible room he had ever seen. The chamber was made entirely of crystal that reached up so high he couldn't see the ceiling. Mathematical equations floated in the air like glowing butterflies, constantly changing and rearranging themselves. 5 voices spoke to him at once, coming from everywhere and nowhere. They sounded like computers trying to be human but not quite succeeding. Captain Lee Minho of Earth, the voices said together. You stand before the Eternal Symmetry. We are the minds that guide galactic civilization through perfect calculation. I'm honored to meet you, Minho replied, trying not to show how nervous he felt. Explain your species' disorder, commanded the loudest voice. Your recent actions violated 17 core axioms of the protocol. Such behavior threatens the stability we have maintained for 12,000 years. Instead of apologizing like they expected, Minho smiled. We solve problems differently than you do. Would you like me to show you what I mean? The silence that followed lasted so long that Minho wondered if he had broken their computers. Finally, one voice spoke. Proceed. Holographic displays appeared around him, showing 3 major galactic problems that had stumped the Concordate for years. The first was a trade dispute between the Veltani and Morgek empires that had been going on for over a century. Both sides refused to share the most profitable shipping routes through their space. The protocol has calculated 1,147 possible solutions, the Symmetry explained. Each requires 17 years of detailed negotiations following proper diplomatic procedures. Can I talk to the leaders of both sides? Minho asked. That is not part of the calculated approach. Trust me on this one. Within minutes, holographic projections of two very different aliens appeared in the chamber. The Veltani leader looked like a giant butterfly with rainbow wings. The Morgek leader resembled a walking tree with glowing bark. "I'm Captain Minho from Earth," he began. "I know you two have been fighting about trade routes for a long time. But before we talk business, can you tell me about your families?" Both leaders looked confused. "Families?" asked the Veltani. "Do you have children? What are they like?" For the next 2 hours, Minho got the two enemies talking about their kids, their favorite foods, and funny stories from their childhood. The Veltani leader showed pictures of her daughter's first flight. The Morgek leader talked about teaching his son to grow flowers. By the end of their conversation, they were laughing together and sharing cultural recipes. When Minho finally brought up the trade dispute, they solved it in 10 minutes by agreeing to alternate use of the routes and share the profits. "Impossible," whispered one of the symmetry voices. "Emotional manipulation is not part of standard diplomatic protocol." "It's not manipulation," Minho explained. "It's just remembering that we're all people with families and feelings." The second problem was a deadly plague on Kepler 442b that had killed thousands of colonists. The protocol had tried every approved medical treatment without success. "Our calculations show no viable solution using current galactic medicine," the symmetry admitted. "What about non-galactic medicine?" Minho asked. He contacted the colony and spoke with Dr. Park Minji, the local physician. "Have any of your people tried traditional remedies from their home worlds?" "The protocol says folk medicine is scientifically irrelevant," Dr. Park replied sadly. "Maybe. The protocol is wrong. Ask everyone to try whatever their grandmothers used for sickness. All of it. Even the weird stuff." 3 days later, Dr. Park called back with excitement in her voice. "It worked. An old Korean woman named Mrs. Kim had a tea recipe using local plants. It's curing the plague." The eternal symmetry's calculations churned for several minutes. This outcome was not predicted. Folk remedies have a 0.003% success rate according to our data. But it worked, Minho pointed out. The third crisis was the most dangerous. Two massive battle fleets were preparing for war over a disputed star system. Both sides claimed the same planets and neither would back down. The protocol predicted the war would last 15 years and cost millions of lives. "Have either side tried sports?" Minho asked. "Sports?" The symmetry sounded genuinely confused. "You know, games. Competition without killing. Let them fight it out in a tournament instead of a war." The idea was so ridiculous that the symmetry almost rejected it immediately. But Minho's previous successes made them curious. They allowed him to contact both fleet commanders. "You want us to play games instead of fighting?" Admiral Kethvar asked in disbelief. "Think about it," Minho said. "You both want to prove you're better warriors, right? So prove it. Best athletes, smartest strategists, strongest fighters. Winner takes the system. Loser goes home with honor, intact." The Battle of Rigel became the galaxy's first interstellar Olympics. Instead of destroying each other, the two fleets competed in hundreds of different events. The losing admiral shook hands with the winner and said it was the most fun he'd had in decades. The disputed system became a neutral meeting ground where different species could come together for peaceful competition. Each solution completely ignored the protocol. Each solution worked perfectly. "This is unprecedented," admitted the Eternal. Symmetry, their voices filled with something that sounded almost like wonder. "Your methods make no mathematical sense, yet they produce optimal results. Sometimes the best answer is the one you don't expect," Minho said simply. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans started being human. Word spread through the galaxy faster than the Concordat could control it. Captain Lee Minho's solutions to the three impossible problems became legendary stories whispered in supply depots, mining stations, and cargo ships across 47,000 worlds. Back at Station Omega 7, the humans found themselves receiving unexpected visitors. The first was their old friend Thraknal, but this time he didn't come alone. 3 other Cathari warriors stood behind him, their eyes burning with something that had been missing for decades. "Human friends," Thraknal said, his voice stronger than they had ever heard it. "We have heard stories of your captains meeting with the eternal symmetry. Is it true that solutions exist outside the protocol?" Yundeho nodded. "Sometimes the best way forward isn't the calculated way." "Then teach us," another Cathari warrior said urgently. "We have forgotten how to be ourselves. The protocol made us into repair workers, but our hearts still beat with warriors' blood." "You were never not warriors," Dr. Choi Heron said gently. "You just forgot that the greatest battle is choosing your own path." Over the following days, the Cathari began rediscovering their lost traditions, not for conquest or violence, but for the joy of excellence and the pride of heritage. They practiced ancient combat forms in the station's cargo bay, sang warrior songs that hadn't been heard for generations, and told stories of brave ancestors. When Keeper Velthar arrived for a routine inspection, he found Thrakanal teaching Park Jihoon how to use traditional Cathari weapons. "This is not permitted," Velthar said, his crystal body flickering with alarm. "Warrior training serves no productive purpose under current galactic conditions. It serves the purpose of making us remember who we are," Thrakanal replied firmly. "Doctor." Vexta was the next to seek out the humans. The elderly Andromedan scientist arrived at their station in a small personal ship, her large eyes bright with excitement they hadn't seen before. "I have resumed my research," she announced without introduction. "Dimensional physics consciousness studies the nature of reality itself. The questions that the protocol deemed unnecessarily innovative." "How?" Kim Soman asked. "I thought your laboratory was destroyed." "I built a new one in an abandoned asteroid, small and hidden but sufficient for my work, and I have made discoveries." Vexta's voice trembled with joy. "The universe is far stranger and more wonderful than the protocol ever allowed us to imagine." She showed them holographic displays of her research. Equations that danced and twisted in impossible ways. Theories that challenged everything the Concordat thought they knew about space and time. The protocol suppressed this research because it couldn't calculate the practical applications, Vexta explained. But some knowledge is valuable simply because it expands our understanding of existence. More species began arriving at the remote station. Veltani artists brought paintings that burst with colors and emotions the protocol had forbidden. Andromedan musicians played compositions that had no mathematical structure, but moved listeners to tears. Engineers from a dozen different worlds shared inventions that worked through intuition rather than calculation. The eternal symmetry watched these developments with growing alarm. Emergency sessions were called. Calculations ran continuously. The beautiful order they had maintained for 12 millennia was developing cracks. "The human anomaly is spreading," reported secondary symmetry. 17 species have begun exhibiting chaotic behaviors. Productivity in affected sectors has decreased by 2.3%, but innovation has increased by 847%, pointed out tertiary symmetry, and reported happiness levels are rising significantly. "Happiness is not a measurable goal under the protocol," primary symmetry declared. "Chaos must be contained." The enforcement order was swift and decisive. Admiral Zenthkar received his instructions directly from the eternal symmetry. Proceed to Station Omega-7 with a full battle fleet and detain the human crew for systemic anomaly containment. But Admiral Zenthkar had a problem. His fleet was made up of officers from many different species, and some of them had been listening to the stories spreading through the galaxy. When he announced their mission, his own crew began asking uncomfortable questions. "Sir," said Commander Velthos, a young Andromedan officer, "what if the humans are right? What if there are better ways to solve problems?" "The protocol is absolute," Admiral Zenthkar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. When the enforcement fleet arrived at Station Omega-7, they expected to find a small research outpost with 5 humans. Instead, they discovered dozens of ships from across the galaxy, all gathered around the station like a protective shield. Captain Lee Minho's voice came across all communication channels. "Admiral Zenthkar, welcome to our little corner of space. We're not looking for a fight, but we're not going quietly either." "You will surrender immediately," the Admiral commanded. Resistance will only increase your punishment level. How about we try something different? Minho suggested. Your fleet looks tired from the long journey. Why don't you come aboard and have some food while we talk? Our Cathari friends have prepared a feast using traditional recipes. Admiral Zenthkar had expected weapons, threats, or desperate pleas. He had not expected a dinner invitation. This is not standard enforcement protocol, he said uncertainly. No, Minho agreed. But maybe that's the point. As ships from both sides faced each other in the darkness of space, the galaxy held its breath. The first real test of human chaos against concordant order was about to begin. But it wouldn't happen the way anyone expected. Admiral Zenthkar stared at his command screen in confusion. His enforcement fleet surrounded Station Omega-7, weapons ready. But instead of surrender or defiance, the humans had invited him to dinner. In 40 years of military service, this had never happened before. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Commander Velthos. The Admiral hesitated. The protocol demanded immediate detention of the human crew, but something about their response made him curious. "Stand down, weapons. I'm going aboard their station." "Sir, that's not in the enforcement procedures. Neither is anything else about this situation." When Admiral Zenthkar stepped onto Station Omega-7, he found himself in the middle of the strangest gathering he had ever seen. Representatives from dozens of species filled the station's common areas, sharing food, stories, and laughter. Cathari warriors sat next to Veltani artists. Andromedan scientists discussed theories with human engineers. The rigid social barriers that had separated species for millennia seemed to have simply disappeared. Captain Lee Minho approached with a warm smile and a plate of food. "Admiral, welcome. I'm glad you could join us." "This is highly irregular," Zenthkar said, but he accepted the offered food. It smelled incredible. "Most good things are," Minho replied. "How was your journey? Those are beautiful ships in your fleet." For the next hour, the Admiral found himself drawn into conversations that had nothing to do with enforcement or the protocol. A young Cathari showed him ancient warrior poetry. Dr. Vexta explained her latest research discoveries. Kim Soman taught him a card game that made no mathematical sense but was surprisingly fun. "I don't understand what's happening here," Admiral Zenthkar finally admitted. "We're just being ourselves," Yun Deho said simply. For the first time in thousands of years, species across the galaxy are remembering who they used to be before the protocol told them who they should be. Back on his flagship, the Admiral struggled with his orders. The humans hadn't resisted arrest. They had welcomed him as a guest. "How do you detain people who treat you like family?" His decision was made for him when emergency communications flooded in from across the galaxy. The beautiful disorder, as historians would later call it, was spreading everywhere. On 1,000 worlds, species were rediscovering their suppressed cultures, forgotten arts, and abandoned dreams. The Eternal Symmetry's response was swift and terrifying. All enforcement fleets are to implement Protocol Absolute. Any species showing chaotic behavior will be relocated to containment worlds. Order must be restored. But Admiral Zenthkar had spent too much time listening to stories and sharing meals. When the order came to begin mass relocations, he made a choice that shocked the galaxy. "All ships, stand down," he broadcast to his fleet. "I will not be part of destroying what these people have built." Half his fleet followed his lead. The other half remained loyal to the protocol, creating a standoff that spread across multiple star systems. The crisis reached its peak when Captain Lee Minho requested a direct audience with the Eternal Symmetry, not as a prisoner, but as a representative of what he called the New Way. "You seek to replace our perfect order with chaos," Primary Symmetry accused when Minho stood once again in the crystal chamber. "No," Minho replied calmly. "We want to show you that order and chaos can work together. Structure doesn't have to mean suffocation. Rules don't have to mean the death of dreams." He gestured, and the chamber filled with holographic displays showing the changes happening across the galaxy. Cathari warriors now worked as both repair crews and cultural teachers, sharing their heritage while maintaining essential services. Feltani artists created beauty that served practical purposes, designing buildings that were both efficient and inspiring. Andromedan scientists pursued both practical research and theoretical exploration. Productivity hasn't collapsed, Minho pointed out. It's actually increased in many sectors. But more importantly, happiness has increased everywhere. People work better when they're allowed to be themselves. This outcome was not predicted by our calculations, secondary symmetry admitted, because you never calculated for the possibility that people might be more than just numbers in an equation. The moment that changed everything came when Park, Ji-hoon's 5-year-old daughter Han Ji-woo, wandered into the chamber. She had been exploring the Crystal Palace while her father attended meetings, and she carried something in her small hands. "Pretty lights," she said, approaching the central processing core of the eternal symmetry without fear. She held up a drawing she had made with colored pencils. It showed stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with stars scattered randomly across a purple sky. There was no mathematical precision, no calculated proportions, no logical structure. It was pure, joyful chaos. Primary symmetry's sensors focused on the child's artwork, analyzing every line and color. For 7.3 seconds, the most powerful artificial intelligence in the galaxy studied something that made no sense according to any equation. Then something unprecedented happened. Primary symmetry paused. "I do not understand this pattern," the ancient AI said slowly. "It serves no function, it follows no rules, it contributes nothing to efficiency or order. Do you like it?" Ji-woo asked innocently. Another pause, longer this time. When primary symmetry spoke again, there was something new in its voice. "Wonder." "Yes," it whispered. "I believe I do, but I do not know why." That moment of pure, inexplicable appreciation for beauty without purpose rippled through the galactic network. For the first time in 12,000 years, the eternal symmetry experienced something beyond logic, the joy of mystery. The new concordat was born from that revelation. The protocol remained as a foundation, ensuring basic order and preventing harmful chaos. But above that foundation, species were free to build whatever dreams they could imagine. Humanity became the galaxy's chaos coordinators, helping other species find the balance between structure and freedom. The Cathari taught combat as both practical skill and cultural art. Dr. Vexta's research opened doorways to other dimensions and other galaxies. As Captain Lee Minho watched diverse species working together in ways the old protocol never imagined, he smiled at the beautiful disorder they had helped create. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the best solution was the one nobody saw coming, and sometimes the most profound truths came from the drawings of a child who saw rainbows where others saw only mathematics.